Abraham and Sarah. It's about 4,000 years ago, like 1900s or so. It's like our family album. We didn't have pictures, so we wrote stories. In the 500s and 600s CE, from the east come the Slavs. Right, coming from the east, from Asia, come the Slavs who push out groups like the Gauls and others further west, and they become the new populations here. And they're pagans. They're pagans, so we Judeans, we Jews, are an interesting population for them. We said this in the Zoom. We're very worldly. We're very useful because we know how, trade and things of this sort, and we know how to read and write. We're literate, whereas these pagan tribes are not, by and large. And so things, it's not like great, but it's good. There's no particular issue with Jews. When does that begin to change? So if the Slavic tribes, which become Poland and Czechia and those kind of countries, show up here in the 500s and 600s, the Christianization process takes place more in the 700s, 800s, and 900s. So by the 1000s, we're in a fully Christian Europe, more or less, and we're no longer just another. We're the other, and we're the evil other who has killed God. Israel, that's the first part of the Talmudic corpus, and he writes a very important commentary, so he's known as the Tosfos Yom Tov. But he wrote two other things, one of which we actually know well, and one that we don't know at all, and I think it's fascinating to tell us about the Jewish community. He's the one that wrote the Mishaberach for the sick. Now, not necessarily the Debbie Freeman version fully, but partially. We say that in the synagogues today still, the Mishaberach for those who are sick. He wrote a second one. The Mishaberach for those who don't talk during the prayers and the Torah reading. And oddly enough, the Jewish people have not adopted that one. We vote with our feet. For the sick, we're good. But this business of not talking and shul, no. That's a tough one.
Guilty.
I don't know. That I don't know. I know these two. But now there's a story that comes. Look around. What question might you?
So far from
Why is he in the back?
Yeah.
Why isn't he in the front? So let's do the story that comes with it, and then we'll see where we can put that into history. So the story goes something like this. Again, there's a few versions of this. One of the responsibilities of a rabbi is to care for the poor, right? And to raise money for the poor. And by the way, he's the rabbi right at the time, towards the end of his life, of the Ukrainian uprising, 1648 to 49, Bogdan Khmelnytsky, who massacres thousands and thousands of Jews and Catholics, but primarily Jews. This breaks the back of Polish Jewry. By the mid-1600s, the golden age of Polish Jewry ends. Starts about 1500. By 1648-49, we remembered in Jewish life as Gezerot Tach V'Tat, 48-49 with the Hebrew calendar. And it's a disaster for the Jewish people. He's the rabbi here then. So that you can imagine a lot of refugees in the city, poverty, and you need to raise money, of course, for the poor. And the story goes that there's a very, very rich man in town of the Jewish community known as Joseph, but he refuses to give money. And they begin to call him Yosef the Miser. He refuses to give money. And he'll send, the Gabbai Tzedakah, the one who's in charge of raising money, and it'll be constantly sent out. And then stories circulate that, beggars would go from door to door, but they would get to Yosef's house. At first they'd be ushered in, come down, sit, have a cup of tea, have something to eat, tell me your story. And then when they got to the point where they're asking for money, he would throw them out of the house in anger. And so finally, his life is coming to an end, and the leaders of the community, he's sick, he's on his deathbed, and the leaders of the community come to him and say, Yosef, he says, you can't take it with you. Now is your chance. Do it. Repent and give money. And he said, no, absolutely not doing it, not going to happen. He said, Yosef, if you don't do this, we're not going to bury you. You're not going to be buried. And he dies, doesn't get money, and they don't bury him. 1 day goes by, 2 days goes by, 3 days go by. Somebody on the Chevra Kadisha feels very guilty. The community committee that will take care of the body, wash it, burial, feels terribly guilty about this. And in the middle of the night, they take the body and they bury it here in the back of the cemetery. The next night, again in the story, Rabbi Yom Tov Lippman Heller has a dream. And in the dream, oh no, I'm sorry, I skipped this thing. On Thursdays, when he starts getting requests from people in the Jewish community who need help for Shabbat. And he's noticing that people are coming to him who have never come before. One comes, second one comes, third one comes, and finally the rabbi says, listen, we're happy to help you, but you've never come before for help. Why? And he said, well, Rabbi, look, I don't know. But he says, till now, and this happens like over a period of a few weeks in the story, till now, every Friday morning, every Thursday night, there'd be an envelope pushed under my door with money. And it stopped. They put two and two together. They understand that Yossel the miser was not Yossel. The miser was the secret Santa, the secret gift. And then in the story, Rabbi Yom Tov Lippman Heller has a dream. And in the dream, Yossel comes to him. And he says, Rabbi, because the rabbi now feels horrible, right? Look what we did to him. We called him a miser. And he said, Rabbi, don't, this was my choice. I didn't want to be known as, that philanthropist. And he says, I wanted to be given in secret. I wanted to be that modest. It was my choice. Everything's fine here for me. In one version, I'm here with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and it's all good. Don't worry, don't feel bad. This is what I chose to do. And then the story says that Yom Tov Lippman Heller said, I will be buried next to Yossela the miser. Now Joseph the miser becomes Yossela, right? The beloved Yossela, the beloved miser, and I'll be buried next to him, which helps us understand why he's buried here. That's the story. In the 1600s, that was apparently the front end. So he's not buried in the back at all. But I ask you, which is the better story? The dry historic fact? Okay, great. But look what we're able to do. It's midrash, right? We're able to take an idea, put it into the story, and say, what is important to us as a community, and we get it, as opposed to, well, that's where the door was. So this is to protect from the snow and the rain.
And the papers?
These are prayers. People putting prayers here. Invited to a conference here in Eastern Europe. Had to be in the 80s or something of that sort, to play Jewish music and to tell Jewish stories, and he does. And he tells the story of Yossel the miser. And he says there's a young Catholic priest, who is mesmerized by the story. And then the second night, this is again, Carlebach is telling us the story of music, and he says the second night, he asked, can you play that again? He does. Long story short, this priest was a descendant of Yossel the miser, and he'd been grappling, he was just grappling, should he return to, it says after the war, his mother hid during the war. He finds out, he said he only found out, sometimes I missed the punchline. He had only recently found out on his grandmother's deathbed that they were Jewish. And now he's grappling, do I stay a priest or fully become a priest, or do I return to my Jewish roots? And he said, I asked God for a sign. This is Shlomo Kabbalah telling the story. He says, and then you show up and you sing a story about my great-great-grandfather. And he says, I don't know what to do. And again, according to Carlebach's version, he eventually moves to Jerusalem and becomes a rabbi. So it's a lovely story. It's a story, but so apparently there were children. We don't know, but he had given away all his money. The point of the story is he had been given charity all these years. Nobody knew it, so there wasn't a fortune to give away. He had already done it, but. Now let's leave. So the story about Rabbi Yom Tov